Well, here we go. TIFF has a Coldplay moment. We're going to tell you all about that. The return of our favorite segment where we push back at what Americans are saying, and then a philosophical rambling as the line marks its 5th anniversary. This is the Line Podcast. This episode of the Line Podcast is brought to you by Unsmoke Canada, which is dedicated to helping Canadians who are looking to quit smoking understand the full range of options available. Despite decades of government programs and increasing regulations, today, nearly 4 million Canadians still smoke cigarettes. Adult smokers who choose to continue to smoke should be aware that other options exist. While not risk-free, alternatives such as heated tobacco, vaping products, and oral smokeless products provide a potentially less harmful choice. Smoke-free alternatives do not involve combustion or burning, like smoking a cigarette does. Instead of heavily restricting access and information about these options, Canada's government should be adopting common-sense legislation that will help further bring down Canada's smoking rates and put information in the hands of Canadians. Information such as the relative risks compared to cigarettes. Because the products are not the same, and they shouldn't be treated the same. It's just common sense. Learn more about how a smoke-free future can be achieved at Unsmoke.ca. Jen, I yield the floor to you. You have a very important announcement to make. A very important announcement to make, and that is my husband and I have gone forward to replace our kitchen cabinet faces. So if you hear some smashing and banging downstairs and or children, it's because it's in the middle of the summer and we are updating my gross disintegrating MDF board kitchen faces. See, this is funny. Like, this is not just a programming note at the start of a podcast, but this is actually for loyal line readers. This is important content because you hung a whole column on the idea of not being sure if you should renovate your kitchen. Yeah, well, I mean, turn the whole cow of your life into content. You know, like sometimes you get the steak cuts and sometimes you get the sausage. Yeah. So, you know, that was one of those cases where I was using some aspect of my life to make a broader point about the economic impacts of the Alberta separatism movement. And the effects on delayed capital investment, and I use my kitchen as an example. But as I said, like any good writer, I let no cut of meat go to waste. You can all look forward to my upcoming column, Matt Gurney, Liberalism of the 21st Century and the Closet Reorganization. Because we all get our summer projects out of the way. It used to be easier to come up with really sexy anecdotes because I used to be much sexier. And like, you know, when you're in your early 20s, it's like the content's flying from the sky. And now I'm, you know, boring, married for 10 years, mother of 2 in suburban Calgary. So I work with what I got. Well, you're as beautiful as the day I met you. So don't worry about that. That wasn't that long ago. That's why. Yeah. The anecdotes might not be as good as they used to be. You know, all kidding aside, it's actually worth mentioning. So in our third segment, we're going to talk a little bit about the line. And, you know, we've just had our 5th anniversary, and we're going to talk a bit about that. But I've also been thinking this summer, Jen, and we'll save most of this for what comes in the third segment. But I don't know if people understand how the columnist's brain works, right? Like I don't think columnists understand how the columnist. It's a mystery to me. Okay, but there is one thing, and it was one of my editors years ago who said to me, the columnist is someone who can look into a pantry full of completely random ingredients and still come up with a great meal. And this is like a few months ago, you were like kitchen cabinets, Alberta separatism, Danielle Smith, and you made a column out of that. Yeah, and take that, ChatGPT. You'll never match it. And if you like I'm working on a column now that should be ready for next week. But like my most recent column was like Mark Carney's 3-month anniversary mark meets Matt's summer reading. And this is the way the columnist brain works. Like you take things that are disconnected and you put them together, which is why an event in Toronto this week made me think of the infamous now Coldplay Kiss Cam catastrophe. I think you know what I'm talking about there, right? Everyone knows what you're talking. I don't think we need to provide context for the Coldplay Kiss Cam catastrophe. Everyone will understand the reference. For any of our listeners who are
like hermits, a powerful corporate couple who were apparently having an affair went to a Coldplay concert together and were caught on the kiss cam and reacted so awkwardly that everyone on the internet were like, ooh, they were hiding something. And the reason I bring this up is because TIFF, the Toronto International Film Festival, they had a bad week. We could put it that way. And because I, like Jen, believe in you get all your little offcuts and scraps, and then you make a sausage out of it. I was thinking about the Coldplay kiss cam, not because Coldplay and TIFF were in the exact same situation, or no, not Coldplay, but the CEO of the company called Astronomer. But to me, it was a fascinating exercise in how companies struggle when they're doing stupid things.
Well, they're caught in public doing stupid things. And also, we would also point out, we have some sympathy for this because even though journalists cover this constantly, like we're always trying to catch people out in these really awkward moments and then use those kinds of gotcha moments or these examples as an opportunity to talk about deeper systemic problems or issues of the company or issues in society or whatever. When we're caught out doing stupid shit, we're helpless. Like we react just as badly as the people we cover. We're worse. It's very incredible, actually. Having watched companies and people react terribly to PR situations would make us more effective at managing our own PR. No, we're helpless. It's hilarious.
I remember telling one of my bosses once, and I was pretty low ranked then, so I was being a little impudent, but I said to him, why are we assuming the reporters who are going to be asking us questions are stupider than the reporters we would send out to ask any other company caught in this situation questions? Like, our opponents are pretty good. A lot of them used to work here. Some of them are going to work here in the future. They're going to see through this bullshit. So, yeah, any reporter would roll their eyes at the corporate speak bullshit that comes out of these institutions, but newspapers think they'll get away with it. Anyway, look, let me tell you what happened at TIFF. Toronto International Film Festival, I think people know, it's an annual event, kicks off as summer draws to a close, so late August, early September. It is one of the largest cultural events in Toronto. It is a major economic driver, and it is also hugely important in terms of public visibility, because you get like every A-list celebrity in the world shows up in Toronto for a couple of weeks.
Yeah, TIFF's a big deal.
It's a big deal.
TIFF, I think, is probably second only to Cannes.
Probably, yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah.
And there was a film that was scheduled to be shown at TIFF. I think it's called, I'm trying to remember the term, it's called The Road Between Us. And it was a documentary that shows one man's story in Israel during the day of the October 7th attacks. And the man is a retired Israeli military officer who basically gets in his car. And I don't want to give too much detail. Like, I think people should see the film, but he gets in his car and he heads south to rescue his family because he realizes early on the 7th that the Israeli military has been caught with their pants down. And he says, I'm not going to wait for the army to get organized. I'm going to grab my gun and I'm going to go save my family. The TIFF had announced that this movie would be airing as part of the festival. And then it announced that it wouldn't be. And this is where I start thinking of the Coldplay thing, because 101 for crisis communications is be consistent. If you're doing something that is going to be unpopular, have a consistent story. And what these guys did, TIFF, when they announced that the film was being withdrawn, is they gave two different versions in two different forums for why they were pulling it. One of them was that they had concerns that there was copyright issues with some of the footage that was used during the documentary. Footage of the October 7th attacks.
And specifically footage that was shot by
Hamas.
And then live streamed by
Hamas.
Right.
The other issue that they gave, and this is the one that struck me as more true, was that there had been internal pushback against airing the documentary. And they were concerned that possibly volunteers would disrupt the event or would refuse to show up if TIFF showed the documentary. In my opinion, both of these explanations are bad. In my further opinion, you can't offer both of them at once. And what I remember, it's friend of the line, Andrew Tumilty. He's a smart political guy, experienced political operator, and also a crisis communicator, communications consultant now. During the Coldplay thing, what he was telling people, Jen, was that the number one rule of crisis management for a company is decide what your best case scenario is, even if it sucks. Decide what your best case scenario is and get there as fast as possible. What TIFF did this week was the opposite. TIFF kept put out like a statement of like, well, clearly a lot of people are upset and we're going to think about it. No, like go silent, figure out what you're going to do and then announce it. And I know for a fact, I can't name names here, Jen, but I can know for a fact that TIFF was hearing from both corporate and public sector sponsors who are going, we put our brand or our money behind this because it's a good news event, and you have turned it into a clusterfuck where there is reasonable expectation based on your own statements for people to conclude that a documentary of a man trying to save his Jewish relatives during a pogrom is too controversial. And TIFF ultimately, and I knew they would, not only are they going to show the film, apparently they're going to give it marquee billing. Like it's now been elevated in the festival. How much it pisses me off on a couple levels. I'll get to the big level in a minute, but the little level is you and I have had this conversation before. You and I would have written the crisis management script for TIFF in about 45 seconds. TIFF needed 3 days. How much institutional credibility did they burn before they arrived at the obvious place?
Okay, so there's a couple little things that I will note here because I think we're going to come to a similar place in our conclusions. One is that, how to say this, the rumor mill has it that the internal functioning of TIFF is bad. It has been a bit of a disaster for a number of years, irrespective of this particular controversy. And I think that institutions and organizations that are internally disorganized and chaotic and maybe even factional are always going to be the ones that deeply struggle to deal with crises that require sort of clear moral clarity. And moral clarity, there's that term, right? So I think that we have to put some of this in context of a kind of a notoriously dysfunctional kind of organization writ large. That's just the rumor mill. I'm not an arts reporter. This is just what I've heard, that anybody who's dealt with TIFF has found that I'm closer to it, even if only geographically. And I've heard the exact same rumors. They've heard the exact same rumors that for a number of years, TIFF's been messy internally. Yep. Which is not very uncommon in cultural organizations, not very uncommon in newspaper organizations, right? Like these you have a lot of people who come at the world in a variety of different ways and are very passionate about what they do, very passionate about their role in the world, very passionate about their issues. And they take their passion into their work. And, unless you have really strong leadership that can marshal that passion into something very effective, it's pretty easy to get internal factions, infighting, disorganization, dysfunction. This is a problem that I think has plagued pretty much every cultural organization in this country to some extent in recent years. And I think TIFF's been no exception to that. The second thing I would just note as someone who has covered TIFF a little bit in the past, there's no purpose to TIFF if you can't publish or publicize controversial documentaries. I mean, I remember 10, 15 years ago now covering TIFF for the Globe and sitting through documentaries that had, full frontal nudity and, women getting men off in playgrounds in, Toronto. Like this is the place for really controversial
Are you
art.
Sure that was a TIFF film? Did you show up at the wrong address?
Oh no, that it was a TIFF film. Believe me, I was there. This is a place where they have mainstream films, certainly, but a lot of the quieter art house stuff is out there. It's art housey. It's out there, man. So the idea that this film was too controversial for TIFF, that's nuts. That is objectively nutty. The second thing that I would just say is I think a little bit more big picture here, and that is I understand that a lot of people in TIFF, because they're coming from downtown Toronto, largely left-wing, largely cultural communities, are going to side very heavily with the Palestinian cause. Sure, great, side heavily with the Palestinian cause. That's totally fine from my perspective. What's not fine from my perspective is you allowing your position on the Palestinian cause to shut down anything that challenges your narrative.
Yeah.
Right? That is a problem. It's fine for you to say, look, I think that Palestine should have its own state. I think that the way that Israel is acting here is inappropriate. It's fine to have a nuanced position on this particular file. I think that, if you're thoughtful, you have to have a nuanced position on this particular file. What I don't think is acceptable is to allow your position on a nuanced file to lead to you actively trying to shut down anybody who disagrees with you. That's messed up. If your support for the Palestinian cause can't survive viewing what Hamas did on October 7th, then your support for the Palestinian cause is thin, right? And that's something that you need to explore in yourself. And why exactly can you not be confronted with the atrocities of what they did?
I think that's bang on. Completely agree. And I had 3 points left to make. You have made one of them. I no longer need to make it. I'm just going to co-sign that. There is something. I have a bigger point to make, and not a smaller point to make. It's an important point, but a briefer point to make. I was talking with a Jewish friend last night who was happy that TIFF has changed his mind and is happy that the documentary will be aired. But one of the things he said to me, and God, there was just such weariness in his voice when he said this, is he goes, I don't know if the people at TIFF realize that they have made anti-Semitism worse, because there are going to be people out there who are going to go, TIFF is controlled by the Jews. Yep. Like this is, here's a somewhat ironic biblical allusion. This is manna from heaven for the people who think that the Jews control Hollywood and the banks and all the money. Because in my view and Jen's view, and I suspect the views of most of our listeners and viewers, what TIFF did was, first of all, the right thing to do. Also the smart thing to do in terms of a corporate position. But there are people who are going to look at it and go, yet more proof that the Jews control everything. And this was a foreseeable process from start to finish. Like this is not 4D chess. Like this is A, B, C, maybe D. This is connect the dots, a really simple progression from where this started to where it ended. And the Jewish community, particularly in Toronto, but everywhere, is going to pay the price for this. But I want to make a bigger point. And this is something we'll probably return to a little bit when we talk about take our philosophical wander in the third segment, Jen. But I want to put an idea to you, specifically in the context of TIFF and the story there. I've been thinking a lot, and this is a column idea I've been noodling, and I haven't been able to kind of pull it all together yet. So I'm thinking aloud a bit here. A lot of people out there are worried about fascism. And you were touching on this in your column, which we're going to talk about later. There does seem to be a resurgence of, if we don't want to call it fascism, maybe we call it hard right authoritarianism. I'm not wedded to any particular term, but the pendulum does seem to be swinging in a lot of places in a way that is bringing out a nasty streak in the right wing. Mm-hmm. And I can't open a newspaper or listen to a talk radio show without hearing someone saying fascism is coming back. Fascism is coming back. Trump is putting troops in the streets. Look at what Orban is doing in Hungary. Look at what Netanyahu's doing in Israel. And I don't think that this is wrong. Like, I'm not arguing with that. I'm worried about some of this stuff too. What's incredible to me is how many of these people seem to see looming fascism or warning indicators of a return of right-wing authoritarianism everywhere, except in surging anti-Semitism, which is like the classic red flag of every right-wing authoritarian movement of the last 100 years, or even a bit earlier than that. And I'm not going to pick on individuals here because I think their heart's in the right place. But I've been looking at people who've been saying, responding to almost everything coming out of the Trump White House fascist red alert. We must man the barricades to stop the fascist creep. But it comes to a documentary that depicts Jewish suffering being apparently beyond the pale. And these people are like, well, we need to have a nuanced conversation.
The flip side to what you said is that I think a lot of Jews, particularly Jews in Israel and North America, are very naive about their support for Donald Trump.
He's not reliable.
Yeah, he's not a reliable ally.
I mean, while we're recording this, he's on his way to Alaska, and we'll see how much of Ukraine he gives away.
Well, exactly, right? He's not a reliable ally. And I think that if we are sort of operating under the understanding that Trump is at the vanguard of an increasingly authoritarian MAGA movement, and we acknowledge that almost all authoritarian movements in history eventually embrace anti-Semitism.
Yeah.
Would I be looking at the MAGA movement and Donald Trump right now and thinking like, oh no, we're fine because Donald Trump's got our back? Yeah, I wouldn't. I don't think so. I don't think that I don't think that Jews in North America and Israel can rely on Donald Trump to have their back in the long term.
No, I don't either. I've absolutely cautioned some of my Israeli friends that if some Arab country makes Trump a better deal, he'll side with them in an instant, right? And absolutely. We saw, who was it? Was it Qatar? I remember someone gave him a plane recently. And I'm thinking, well, that's not subtle.
That's not subtle. And like I mean, a lot of the Arab states know how to play this game.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Like yes, they know exactly. Like, I mean, they even decorate their palaces in the same way that Trump does, right? I mean, like this is not subtle. So
no,
yeah.
I agree with all that. I just think in the specific context of North Americans, if you are alarmed about the rise of fascism, the anti-Semitism in our community should be one of the things you are most alarmed about, because that is what's that old saying? Canary in the coal mine, right? Like the canary is on its last breath here.
Well, and let's bring this back to a conversation about liberalism, because I know that we're going to have that conversation in the third segment. But like, how could, in an ideal world, TIFF have handled a controversy like this? One of the ways I think they could have handled this. Okay, you have the October the 7th documentary, and then you have a double bill with a documentary of something that demonstrates the Palestinian perspective. Was there nothing else in the docket that you could have pulled up and then basically have this as a double bill kind of Night-O-Israel and Palestine, where people could have gone to both films and maybe been exposed.
Discussion, like you make it an event.
You make it an event. You say, look, we're at the forefront of dealing with some of the most pressing and important geopolitical issues because we're an international film festival, even though we happen to be in Toronto. And you give people an opportunity to see a wide variety of perspectives on this issue. That's how you frame and resolve this problem without exacerbating anti-Semitism. And making people believe, well, the Jews control the film festival. No, you turn this into an opportunity for a dialogue. That's the ideal scenario here, not shutting people down, but welcoming more people to the table. And I just think it was a profoundly lost opportunity. And I think I say that with the acknowledgement that when you're in the middle of it and the panic's hitting you and you're freaking out because everyone is criticizing you all at once, people don't necessarily make smart, thoughtful, cool-headed decisions, right?
You remember you had this line probably about a year ago. I thought it was fantastic, which said that then Prime Minister Trudeau needed to appoint one random farmer from Saskatchewan to his cabinet.
Yeah.
I think about that all the time because I think every institution needs one completely normal person.
Saskatchewan farmer.
And there was
we're going to run out of Saskatchewan farmers.
There was this joke years ago, you've probably seen it, where basically it said every Olympic event should also have one random person thrown in as like a control.
Yeah.
So like imagine like the 400 meter and the starting pistol goes and like 7 people just are like racing down the track. And then there's just some guy like plodding along. Every cultural group, every political group, every institution needs a random control person in there, because I tend to think, Jen, any random person who was not like so far inside TIFF it had vanished up its own digestive system would have understood to do exactly what Jen said. Okay, you know what? We're going to air the film and we're going to tell the volunteers You're going to show up and you're going to run this event properly. And as soon as it's over, we're going to sweep the floors, get all the popcorn up. We're going to give everybody a 15-minute intermission, and then we're airing the other film about the Middle East. It's going to be an event. We're inviting the press. We're inviting speakers. This would have been so easy to do, except the response was to run like cowards, to spin different explanations, and then vanish into a badly executed communications plan that took way too long.
Well, we've seen this.
None of it was surprising.
We've seen this before. And I also understand, how should I say this? It's interesting to me how many people forget that we're not in 2020 anymore. And that, for example, the underling revolts are no longer effective at getting institutions to change course. If they had threatened, for example, volunteer revolt, like the volunteers would refuse to man the staff, and they put the call out and said, our volunteers are refusing to help us put on this particular film, do you not think there would have you would have been inundated with 1,000 new volunteers who would have been willing to step up, if not in direct support for the film and Israel itself, then for the principle of the right to screen the film at a very minimum. And as I know that when people panic, their vision goes tunnel, right? And I can see how people get to this place, right? Holy shit, all of our volunteers are going to quit on us. We have to appease, blah, 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 blah. But, as two people who have seen and been through a couple of, junior staffer revolts of this nature, which effectively amounts to a kind of collective bullying in order to force institutions to accept new moral lines. They're pretty easy to shut down if you have even a little bit of moral courage. If you even have a little bit of sense of yourself and sense of who and what you are and what your mandate is, you can always appeal to that mandate and be like, no, our job at TIFF is to film controversial segments that a lot of ordinary people aren't going to like, or are going to challenge their assumptions or make them feel uncomfortable. That is our fundamental role. And we're going to lean into that. And if you're not comfortable with that mandate, you can't be here. Yeah. And if that had happened, and if there had been a kind of a volunteer revolt or a staff walkout, and TIFF waved the flag in the middle of Toronto and said, our staff has walked out of protest that we're going to be filming this controversial film, do you not think there would have been 1,000 people around the door to replace them?
There would have been, and TIFF would have come out of it looking heroic instead of pathetic.
Yeah.
And the other thing, one more thing I'll add, Jenna, we can wrap it up, and we'll return to these topics in our third segment, the philosophical topics, not the specific one. There's another element to this, and it's going to come a little bit out of left field, but do you remember, I think it was the Toronto Star had a story maybe about a year ago, maybe not quite, right after October 7th and the beginning of the Israeli military operation in Gaza. A group of students at TMU, Ryerson, signed a petition. I think it was the law faculty. I don't remember that for sure, but I think it was the law faculty. And it was an open letter. And then the open letter was not great. It probably could have run through the editor maybe one or two more times. And then very quickly you had law students going, holy shit, I signed this thing because this girl I liked forwarded it to me, or because everyone else in my dorm signed it and I didn't want to, but I never really even read it. And it was not great. I don't remember all the details, but it was more anti-Semitic and unreasonably anti-Israel than I think was warranted. And a lot of these people are like, oh my God, I can't believe I signed this thing without reading it. The reason I bring this up is because when institutions like TIFF lost the moral fiber to say no, some of the people who end up getting hurt by that are the idiots too. How many young legal careers would have been not necessarily saved, but enhanced by having an adult in the room sit down and go, guys, we're not giving into this bullshit. Are you sure you want to put your name on this? Once the word gets out that activism is hard and it's arduous and it's a process, and you should only engage in it when you're actually really committed and you're willing to pay consequences for it. That's good. That's fine. That's democracy. That's good. But slacktivism around late 20 teens, early 2020s was so cheap and so easy. People were like, well, it cost me nothing to sign this letter that I haven't read. Oops, it turns out it was anti-Semitic. People weren't thinking. Institutions could have done so much, not only to protect themselves, but young, idealistic, naive people from doing stupid shit. And I think I know it's not the most important part of it, but it kind of occurred to me here. How many volunteers at TIFF could have been dissuaded from walking out if one adult at TIFF had called everybody into a room and said, we're going to leave it up to you guys to decide if it's good for your future career prospects to refuse to air a documentary showing suffering of a Jewish family in the middle of a terror attack. And how many people in the room would have been like, whoa.
I don't like threats, because I think people should be able to act and behave according to their consciences without worried about threats so much. The Ryerson TMU thing was really interesting, because do you want to know what I find makes for really successful lawyers?
Reading.
People who read the things they sign.
Yeah.
And put serious and meaningful thought to the things that they sign, which is not to say that I haven't in my youth been stupid and written stupid shit. Like we all kind of get there, and I do hope that people are willing to give young people a bit of a mulligan on some of that stuff, because I think that we're all young and we all do careless things. But if putting your name on that letter was perhaps an indication that the law is not for you. I don't know what to like. You should read the things you sign. You should read them carefully. You should maybe consider them thoughtfully and ask yourself whether or not you seriously believe everything on the letters that you sign publicly in public. I don't know. It's just
in 9 years, you and I should find some of these kids and do a 10-year retrospective of the Ryerson letter, because I will be curious to find out how many of them are contract lawyers.
Yeah, that's actually a brilliant idea. Let's put a pin in that. I don't know if there's anything else to say. I do believe that, we live in a pluralistic society and we should be welcoming a wide diversity of views, but you can't live in a pluralistic society when only one side ever gets a platform. And, the way to handle this very obviously was to literally just find a film, which I'm sure there were probably 5 other films in the TIFF lineup. I'd be shocked if there weren't, that demonstrated the Palestinian perspective or gave a really heartfelt look at the Palestinian perspective, and run a double bill. That was the way you do it in a liberal pluralistic society. That's how you handle a problem like this.
You want to know something, Jen? I'm comfortable speaking for us both here. You want to know something Jen and I have never done in our lives? We've never tried to shut down someone else's view. We will disagree with it in public. We will refuse to publish things.
I wouldn't go so far to say that. I think that there have been times when I've gone to people and said, that's not a person who's disagreeing with me. That's a person who's engaging in harassment against me. And I think that needs to stop.
Sure.
And whether or not that person interpreted that as me shutting down their criticism, I didn't interpret it that way. So I think that there are gray areas, for example, where I think that's not me trying to shut you down. That's me trying to stop what I'm perceiving as a very sexist harassment campaign, and a prolonged and sexist harassment campaign. Oh
God, I know who you mean. It just clicked. Okay, I'll rephrase. You and I have never tried to get another outlet to not publish something. We've never tried to say to someone, you shouldn't be publishing that article. No.
If I have gone to another outlet or another, I can't think of a specific example of me doing that. But I could think of a hypothetical scenario where somebody submits something to another outlet, and I know backstory, where I've gone to an editor and been like, there's backstory you're not familiar with here, and I want to make sure you're familiar with the backstory because it provides necessary context to your editorial decision making.
Oh, sure. I've complained if I've been misquoted. I've been misquoted. I've written an editor and said, hang on. Or
I've just happened to know of a really convoluted context that maybe wasn't portrayed in you know what I mean? But that's never in a desire to shut people down. It's just to make sure that a fuller picture of the situation is actually potentially getting to air, and allowing particularly friends who are editors to make educated decisions about what they're choosing, informed decisions, right? Like, it's never a desire to shut people down per se, but I think there are some gray areas. I think this is I think it's a bit of a meander off the garden path here, though, because in this case, this isn't a gray zone.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, God, I was also about to say, Jen and I are also proudly, I feel comfortable speaking for Jen, that we have never beaten a hobo to death with a golf putter. Jen's like, well, hang on. There's some nuance there, Matt. I'm like, ugh. All right. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back in a minute, we are going to, well, speaking of nuance, this actually is an interesting one. There's an American report out on Canada. We're going to talk about it. Jen has read it. She is unimpressed, but the Americans aren't totally wrong. So stick around. We're back in a moment. Check us out at readtheline.ca. Like and subscribe to us there. Spread the good word of our podcast. Follow us on whatever app you're listening to. Tell all your friends. And stick around. We'll be back in a moment.
For hundreds of communities across Canada, forestry is a lifeline, supporting 200,000 workers, $87 billion in annual revenues, and $37 billion in exports, $29 billion to the United States. But it's more than just a driver of our economy. It's key to addressing some of our biggest challenges. We need an action plan for our forest sector and its employees, one that will help build the homes we need with Canadian wood, reduce the risk of wildfires, and create more family-supporting jobs right here at home. To learn more about what forestry can do for Canada, visit forestryforthefuture.ca.
So, Matt, in this latest reinstallment of Fuck You, America, which I still love, want to talk a little bit. There has been a report put out by the State Department in the U.S. On freedom, basically,
press freedom.
Press freedom.
Yeah, freedom is overall freedom, right?
Yeah, it's human rights practices. It's the 2024 Country Rights Report, Human Rights Practices. This was flagged by Politico this week.
Yeah, I read it.
This is not anything new. The State Department puts out these kind of annual, country by country looks at issues around human rights problems in each respective country. What was interesting about this particular one was apparently this was 2024, so I'm actually not sure when this came out. I said it was flagged for me by Politico, so I'm not actually sure when it was came out, but they flagged it first for a particular reason. Previous to the Trump administration, the kinds of things that would get flagged in Canada for press reports would be like First Nations and Indigenous issues, for example, which we all know we have ongoing issues around. This year, real shift in tone. And if you've been paying attention to, the types of commentary that come out from places like Joe Rogan and a lot of Magaland about problems in Canada, perhaps the shift in tone will not surprise you. Real focus on freedom of expression and freedom of press. Now, I've made this point before that if you go and you watch right-wing media about Canada from America, you kind of get this bizarrely inflated dystopian view of what's happening in America, in Canada, that the communists have taken over and shut down freedom of speech and blah, 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 blah. And then if
all the journalists were euthanized.
Yeah, pretty much. Like a real hyper focus on press freedom, real hyper focus on MAID, real hyper focus on the woke stuff. And then if you go and you watch, left-wing media in America about Canada, this is a utopia. Like it's like all of our problems are fixed here.
And all the gay married people got free healthcare.
Exactly. Yeah. So both sides are, how should I say this, building a narrative of Canada according to their own needs and fixations. Like Canada is a great
utopia or a dystopia.
Yeah, it's we're a great screen for ideological projection of the Americans. So this particular report came out, focus on the convoy, focus on media and press freedoms, focus on a lot of the Online News Act. And it's interesting because it touched on stuff that we've been writing about for years here at The Line, right? Like we here have been criticizing the overdependence of the Canadian media ecosystem on government subsidies, handouts, and grants, right? And that our fear has always been that this would create, if not the reality of a self-censorship model, but at a very minimum, the perception of a conflict of interest, and that this was going to hamper our ability to effectively cover power and hold government to account. That's still true. And this is in the report. There's a lot of talk about, for example, the convoy and the debanking that happened during the convoy. Correct. There was a lot of talk about the Online News Act and the effects of sort of Facebook pulling our news, the Online News Act. There's a lot of effect on this sort of disparate treatment of certain independent media, particularly right-wing independent media. The growth of things like exorbitant security fees for right-wing media to hold events in practice. So it's like everything in the report is really interesting because it's all for the most part accurate, but it's just really unnuanced, if that makes sense. So, we at The Line don't take government money. We pride ourselves in not taking government money. I think we're one of very few journalists who are not dependent on government handouts. And I think the overdependence on government money in the media ecosystem is toxic. I think it's utterly corrosive, and I think it hugely contributes to decline in trust in institutions and media institutions. Would love to see some better data on that, but I suspect it actually does. But do I think that wholesale all thousands of journalists in Canada are going out of their way to give favorable treatment to the Liberal government because of these subsidies? No. I think that the bias that exists in Canadian media is more a product of class and geography than it is of strict financing. It's not to say that I don't think it's there. I think it's there. It's a contributing factor. I'm opposed to government funding for a lot of different reasons. But do I think that, Joe Blow, CBC reporter, who's covering courts that week is twisting their coverage because they know that if, Mark Carney doesn't like him, he's out of a job? Yeah, no, that's not quite how this works. It's not quite correct. There's other stuff that we can point to as well is the convoy stuff and the debanking and stuff. Like, I think I came out against the government's decision to freeze bank accounts of people who were involved in the convoy in the context in which they did. I thought that was an egregious overreach.
Never explained why. Like I remember at the time we were saying, if there's a reason we have to be doing this, tell us.
Yeah, this was, I think that was just an egregious overreach. And I think it severely damaged institutional trust among some people in this country. And I think it severely damaged our reputation abroad that we did that. But also, let's put this into context. We're talking about a couple hundred people here. There was not mass debanking of thousands and thousands and thousands of people. There was a very inappropriate, very wrong debanking of a couple of, I'm not even sure if we have the final numbers, but it was in the dozens, not the thousands. So, some context is probably appropriate in that conversation.
It should be. But we're moving into, obscure reference here. You ever read Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy?
Mm-hmm.
So we're moving into the era where the State Department is no longer describing Canada as harmless, and we've gone to mostly harmless. But this is classic history is written by the victors stuff. And I know this is different, but you probably would have seen. Well, actually, you were traveling last week. Did you see the story about the Smithsonian?
No, I didn't.
So the Smithsonian has edited historical materials related to the presidential term from early 2017 to 2020. As references to congressional legal proceedings have been removed from exhibits. Bias exists. There is left-wing bias. There is right-wing bias. There is even centrist bias, blind spots, et cetera, et cetera. People are way better at spotting it and calling it out when it's the other guys. I think that's just human nature. But it is fascinating to me to see the way that U.S. state institutions that would have once prided themselves not on perfect neutrality and equity, but reasonable neutrality and equity are just being co-opted. And a point you have made many, many times is be careful what powers you grant yourselves, because they will eventually be used by your enemies against you. I'm wondering, you're saying a minute ago, MSNBC, right? Treats Canada like a paragon. What will Bernie Sanders' State Department say about Canada in their annual reports, right? Or Probably not saying. Honestly, I have no idea who the next Democrat president will be, but President Newsom, we'll just say that. Gavin Newsom, president of the United States, appoints Hillary Clinton Secretary of State again, or maybe Chelsea Clinton by that point. And then they decide to rewrite the journal for all of the allies. What are they going to look like? This is just a back and forth going on that, to my mind, is nuts. It's not going to end well for you, for me, for anyone. And I joked to you before, Jen, that I didn't read the full report, but I glanced at it. It read to me like a 23-year-old mega intern and ChatGPT rewriting the State Department's report to please the bosses. And it's not that they're wrong. It's just that there's, as Jen said, there's no nuance there. But I don't know, Jen, do we live in an age where anyone's rewarded for nuance?
No, not at all. And that's exactly why we are basically borderline non-successful substackers now. So that's great for us. Yeah, sorry, you're hearing the saw in the background. That's just democracy. Anyway,
democracy manifest.
Just choose to take that as a metaphor, as an oral metaphor. Like, I don't have much more to say this other than the fact that if there's any country right now that has no credibility to be criticizing any aspect of Canada on the human rights file, the problem that I have with this actually isn't that I think that it's totally wrong. And like many of the criticisms that, ChatGPT and the intern have come up with are the same, I'm sure, pulled from my own articles.
Yeah.
So it's the way that we've structured, media in Canada hugely disfavors independent media outlets. We've created a system where your access to political power helps to create winners and losers in this particular market. It's extremely corrosive. It is diminishing of trust. It's a huge problem. You and I have been talking about it and writing about it for years.
Yeah.
But you know who I'm not going to be lectured by?
Trump White House?
The Trump White House. Trump State Department. I don't think that anyone has an obligation to take these guys seriously anymore because they've completely trounced their own credibility on these files. So moving on.
Yeah, I've said this to you before, and I've written this before in different places, Jen, but one of the genuinely hard things to do, and I think you and I are trying to do our best. So talking before about biases, we are not free of bias. We have our own. But I think one of the real challenges for Canadians, particularly Canadian journalists and policymakers for the next 3.5 years, is going to be separating weirdness coming out of America that is completely weird and performative, and separating from that valid criticisms. And there are, in this State Department report, valid concerns, but they're presented in such an overtly ham-fisted and biased, slanted language that not only can I not take them seriously, but I'm worried that 41 million of my buddies are going to read that instead of going, well, it's overstated, but there are some genuine concerns here. They're going to go, hey, elbows up, huh? And like Mike Myers is going to do another commercial. And
meanwhile, C18 is going to remain on the books, and I'm not going to be able to distribute my content on Facebook forever.
We're going to rename it the Fuck You, Donald Trump Act. Because
great. Super. Anyway, on that note, fuck you, America. So this is great. Thank you. Appreciate that. And on that note, we're going to top this off with a little bit of a meandering philosophical conversation about in which we reflect our 5-year anniversary here at The Line. If that's not for you, then you know what? We've made it really easy for you to stop this podcast at a nice, happy 45-minute mark. If you've got longer to go in your drive, then click and follow us. We're here for you, and follow us after the hit.
This episode of The Line podcast is also brought to you by Airbnb. To solve the housing crisis, Canada needs 5.8 million new homes by 2030. And while some think short-term rentals like Airbnb are taking homes away, that's just not the case. Because, according to Statistics Canada, the number of Airbnbs that could be converted into long-term homes amounts to only 0.6% of Canada's housing stock. How can you solve the problem when you're focused on less than 1% of the housing market? To learn more, visit airbnb.ca/closer look. It's, first of all, you and I are terrible parents, not necessarily to our actual children. I hope we're good parents to them, but we're bad parents to The Line. About 2 weeks ago, before Jen went away on holiday, I had said to her, hey, our 5-year anniversary for the line is coming up. We should have something to commemorate it. And only afterwards did I actually go back in the archive and discover that we had both missed it. It was the last week of July. I was convinced in my brain, I was convinced that it was August, but no, it was the last week of July 2020 when we launched this thing. And you wrote a column this week lauding the 5-year anniversary of the line. And
so, I mean, look, I'm not necessarily the best parent, but you can be guaranteed that out of guilt, I'll give you more than enough presents after the fact.
Great present. Yeah, it was a great present. What was really interesting to me is, so like you went away on holiday and you came back and you'd written this column, and you and I hadn't really talked about the 5-year anniversary. You just kind of went out and wrote it. And it was fascinating to me because what you wrote was not only how I would have written it, but you wrote almost 80% of the stuff that I would have wanted to say. And what I loved was that you started it talking about the Nova Scotia walking ban, it's been called. And I actually talked about that on my On the Line episode this week, where I said overtly in the episode, I don't have the emotional strength to have another debate about whether this is good. I just want to talk to the firefighter about what's happening. And 5 years after the line started, so much has happened. Like, let me just throw some events at you.
Has it? Because my memory is terrible, like quite notoriously. So I have like a couple of memories from the last 5 years, but more or less I'm at a loss. I'm
going to miss a lot of things, but just here's a few things from our launch date to today. COVID vaccines were invented because when we started this thing, we were still in the first summer. Queen died. Russia expanded invasion of Ukraine. October 7th. Trump reelected. Trudeau resigns. Doug Ford reelected. Jason Kenney spilled and replaced by Smith. And these are just off the top of my head, things that we could talk about. And yet, and you made this point beautifully in your column this week, the reason I absolutely refuse to talk about the Nova Scotia walking ban is because it's the same fucking argument that we were having 5 years ago. It is identical to the COVID argument. And if you can find me one person who is on a different side of this issue than they were on the COVID one 5 years ago, I might become interested in it. But until then, it's just like, and I dared peek at Twitter a few days ago.
Oh no. I've been fully cold turkey on Twitter for months now, and I'm a happier person. I garden.
I don't garden. I'm a happier person because I don't garden. But I was looking at I saw the people making the arguments for and against. And Jen, I swear to God, if we had come up with a list of 25 of their names and you had just said to me, you would quiz me, here's a name, what's their side? I would have gotten 25 for 25. Just based on ideological priors and especially COVID priors. I would have been able to tell you in advance what side everyone was taking. What
side am I going to be on? Matt?
You've already explained your position, so it's not a fair question. Here's my question for you.
Okay.
Go back in time, explain 2025 to your 2020 self. What is she the most surprised about? What is she the least surprised about?
She's most surprised that the Liberals managed to hang on. She's most surprised that Trudeau didn't go down and that we don't have a conservative government. She is least surprised by the lingering damage to social cohesion and public trust that was caused by COVID, and the fact that we're still dealing with the knock-on effects of that, however indirectly.
I think my version of that is that I am surprised Trump is president again. I am not surprised that woke peaked. I might have been.
Yeah. We all knew that woke was going to peak 2021.
I might have been a little bit surprised because I think now with hindsight, you and I, like, we've kicked around this idea. I don't know exactly when peak woke was, but I actually think if you were to kind of just put a marker down somewhere, somewhere between summer of 2020 and winter of 2021.
Yeah, it was about when we launched.
And I think that would have surprised me. I would have thought at the time that we were going to have a longer ideological battle.
Yeah, I mean, the speed at which it's collapsed has been, sorry, this is more screaming. You could just assume that's the demons of the past.
Yeah, exactly.
There you go.
That's a pink-haired progressive in your house hiding who just heard Jen say woke has collapsed and screamed.
Firstly, I want to just address the use of the word woke here, because I think that one of the problems that we're still running into is that there's no common understanding of what the word woke really meant. I think you have a lot of very well-meaning, nice, sort of left-leaning people who are just like, woke's just an attempt to be equal, and what's your problem with that, bigot? And then when you say stuff like peak woke or you're anti-woke, what they're interpreting is you're just a bigot who wants white people to be in charge forever. And, when you have people who are a little bit more conservatively inflected or have a slightly different perspective on this, look at this, there are certain white people who actually do just want white people to be in charge forever and saw woke as a threat to white supremacy. And there are those people out there. And then you've kind of got people like us who are like, yeah, I'm actually for a more egalitarian society. The problem that I have is that you guys were using and pushing highly illiberal aims to try and cement that new egalitarianism, which could never be egalitarian because of the process in which you were using to engage with it. I can support equality. I can't support mass deplatforming. I can support equality, but I can't support, using bullying, shame, and ostracization to radically reduce the Overton window to what a narrow group of relatively young and inexperienced people believe is an appropriate conduct and debate. That's sort of where I got off the bus with that shit. And I think my argument against that was always pretty sensible. And it was, you might be able to gain short-term consensus on some of these issues, but that consensus is brittle and won't last.
Yep.
Because if you don't actually build consensus through meaningful debate and disagreement, the ultimate consensus, I'm using in scare quotes that you pull out of here, will be based in fear and social coercion as opposed to real belief. And one of the great benefits of living in a liberal society is that the process of disagreement and the process of hashing things out is what allows us to get to real, genuine, durable consensus on issues like, for example, gay marriage over time. It was the process of a robust debate on gay marriage that ultimately led to the majority of the country coming around to the idea that if the gays want to marry, let them. This is stupid. By comparison, how well is that quote unquote consensus on child
gender transition? Yeah.
Gender transition for children going? Oh, it's fallen apart in 30 seconds and it's completely crumbled.
If anything is now moving the other way. Yeah.
In fact, if anything, moving strongly in the other direction, because the second that the fear and the shame around having a different opinion on those issues disappeared, so did the supposed consensus subsequently evaporated. So, but all of that being recognized and all of that being acknowledged, the pendulum that is swinging right now is moving to something that's every bit as authoritarian and bullying and terrible, but in some ways much, much, much worse, because it's also being backed up by force and by the misuse of the legal apparatus and the state in order to enforce it. And that's particularly true in the United States. In Canada, not so much true. We've charted a much more measured path here, and I'm glad that we have. But in America, things are going bad fast, and it's amazing to me to have had some opportunities to speak to people in America. And some of them really, really get it and are very, very alarmed. And some of them are like frogs in a pot. Well, that's just a bubble. It's a little warmer than it used to be.
Can I tell you something?
A little hot.
Let me tell you, and I think, Jen, 100%, I'm going to back you up here. I tried to do an on-the-line interview a couple months ago on a topic where I can guarantee you 2 or 3 years ago, I would not have had a hard time finding a guest. Mm-hmm. No one would talk to me on the record.
No, I've had the same experience. Trying to get American guests to talk about contentious topics who are in positions of academic authority or government authority is basically become impossible.
Easiest thing.
Used to be the easiest thing to do. They've shut down.
Yeah.
Right now in this week in Washington, we've got President Trump using the high crime rates in Washington as an opportunity to federalize the police presence in Washington with promises to do the same. We have, people in the Trump administration going on Fox News saying, essentially, we're going to appropriate foreign assets in American soil. Things are getting real dark, real fast. And I think that forces us at the line to evaluate where we stand and what our values are and what we're doing here. And that was kind of what I was trying to do in the column. And I think that's very normal. I think all outlets, all institutions should every couple of years have an honest conversation with themselves about, okay, what are we doing here? What is our mandate? What is our purpose? What is our raison d'etre? And because the cultural and political environment that we started this, our outlet in has changed dramatically in the last 5 years, so too must our mandate and our raison d'etre. We're no longer trying to eke out a living for ourselves in the era of quote unquote peak woke, because peak woke's over. Now we're trying to eke out a living for ourselves doing something that we value and that we think is important. And I think that my general circling is around our mission and our mandate has to do with, continuing to defend what I think of as being classically liberal values of freedom of speech and individualism and individual rights. And also understanding that threats to those values are increasingly coming from a contingent of the conservative movement, not so much from the liberal movement anymore. I think that the air's gone out of that particular balloon.
It's fascinating to me to watch, and fascinating is a bit of a Laurentian waspy understatement. When I say fascinating, I mean fucking infuriating. That I'm looking at the very same people who a few years ago were like, burn down our institutions, they're all corrupt and like white male settler colonialism, are now realizing we have nothing with which to stop a surge in right-wing authoritarianism because the moderating institutions have been gutted. And they're not gone in most cases. They still exist.
Oh, and they completely undermine their own credibility to defend those basic values.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
And they're going to it's going to be a long, hard road back to hoe, You and I think, always knew this was going to happen. And one of the reasons why we were so deeply horrified by watching our own media institutions be taken over by this ideological threat was, I remember having a distinct moment when I was literally on Twitter, it was years and years ago now, where it was almost, I was talking about freedom of speech, and I had so taken the idea of freedom of speech as being a universally supported value for granted that it had never even occurred to me that someone could be like, well, freedom of speech is some kind of white nationalist ploy. That came so out of left field for me that I was gobsmacked when I first heard that argument. Literally gobsmacked. And I remember thinking to myself very distinctly when I started to see this argument go around on Twitter, it was almost like a memo had gone around that I had missed, that we were not supporting freedom of speech anymore, and that was bad.
Yeah.
Bad if you did that. It was like a memo had gone around. That's literally what it felt like. And I remember thinking to myself, holy shit, if we've given up on freedom of speech, it's over. How can you as a journalist, as someone who builds your entire career and identity around the right to speak your truth in public, not support freedom of speech as a foundational principle of your being? I'm like, we're done. It's game over music at that point. 80-bit sound. The second you had journalists give up on that, it was done. And I just refused, and I took a lot of shit for it. And, people have said some pretty horrible things about me online as a result of the fact that basically from my perspective, I was defending exactly the same values that I was defending 20 years ago, 15 years ago, 10 years ago. I don't think that my value set changed. But I got treated and regarded as some kind of like white supremacist evil Nazi as a result of that. And that was completely wrong and incorrect. And it wasn't accurate. And I think it was probably damaged me a little bit personally to see that kind of rhetoric get spewed about me. And I just suffered a high degree of disillusionment in almost all of our institutions that they just went along with that. And yeah, I'm still kind of recovering from that experience. But now I think a lot of those institutions have left themselves fatally weakened. Not so much in Canada, because Canada, the countercurrents aren't as strong, and that's good. But in America in particular, a lot of those institutions that people used and depended on to make meaning and help understand the world and develop a sense of trust in their institutions and the world around them, they've fatally weakened themselves because they couldn't stand up for those values. It's like people are horrified that all these media institutions and all these law firms have bent the knee to Trump. And I'm just like, dude, they bent the knee to woke 5 years before.
Yep.
If that's like saying, oh yeah, this person who failed level 1 of the boss in Mario Kart suddenly couldn't. Sorry, that's the kitchen being worked on. That's the kitchen being worked on. Like, look, if you failed level 1 of the boss fight in Mario Kart, you're not going to succeed in level 2 when the fight is much harder and the bosses are bigger and scarier. And a lot of these institutions, from my perspective, failed level 1.
Then I think I would add, Jen, I agree with that. And I would add to it, like, one of the things I was thinking about, your column was excellent, and it did get me thinking about this. And I've been noodling similar ideas for a while, and sooner or later it'll congeal into column form. But thinking about the last, say, 6 months, and we'll round it off, but kind of, do you remember? You'll remember this because we talked about it. Like that first time we had a report that Trump had brought up to then Prime Minister Trudeau that Canada should become the 51st state. And a lot of people's immediate response was, oh, he's just joking. He's trolling the prime minister. And you very quickly were like, oh, no, this is a probe. Like, this is like, they're starting to float the idea and they're going to test us. And so from that moment to this moment, 6, maybe 7 months. And during that time, it's been elbows up, never 51, got to fight the Americans. Gosh, wouldn't it be useful to have a unifying national identity? Wouldn't it be great? It would be
very handy for moments of national crisis and the demands of national unity. Yeah, national identity would have been real handy.
Things like rallying symbols, like statues and monuments. And the
shared
flag.
Narratives and
the flag, something
as
like
those
basic
things
as that.
Existed for a reason. Wow.
And it's incredible to me to see people who 3 years ago were telling me in all sincerity that the Canadian flag made them feel sick because now it was an anti-Indigenous symbol of settler genocide, are now wearing it on a button overlaid with the phrase never 51. And one of the things that's weird about me, and forgive me for getting navel-gazy just for a second, either as a personal strength or a weakness, and I will leave that for others to decide, I'm a pretty consistent person. I'm not prone to big swings. You know, I'll change my mind in the face of evidence, but I don't wildly careen from hobby to hobby or position to position. And when I went back and I read the original essay that launched the line, published in July of 2020, and I read your essay this week, I agreed with them both because my views haven't changed. But I kind of feel like for a few years there, 5 years ago, you and I had very good reason to conclude that moderating civic institutions, government, artistic, cultural, whatever, they weren't doing their jobs. And their jobs aren't to sell tickets to movie fests or have press conferences, really basic stuff, the sinews that make a society and a civilization work. They were falling down on the job, and worse than that, they were actually actively demolishing some of the guardrails of a free society. And now we're trying to rebuild them again in a hurry. And what you wrote 5 years ago in the essay that launched the line and what you wrote this week, to me, it's common sense.
Well, here's the thing that I would just say is, one, I don't want to give the right and the conservatives a pass in this. There is a contingent of the right that has fallen sway to the appeal of a very superficial authoritarianism.
Yeah.
And they are now, to my mind, much more dangerous to those basic civil liberties and institutions than the hypocritical lefties who are now wearing the pins. And I don't want to let my disillusionment and my disappointment in those institutions blind me to that reality. Right? Like, the threats changed. And, we had this conversation yesterday about, the backlash to Sydney Sweeney's stupid jeans thing.
Sydney Sweeney has good jeans.
One thing, firstly, is that part of the thing that drives me nuts about some of these stories is that when you go and you look at the core of it, there was no controversy. The controversy was totally ginned up. What happened was that there was a couple of blue sky accounts that made some crazy comments about how this was a white supremacist dog whistle, like literally a handful of blue sky accounts who had a couple hundred followers. And then a bunch of, desperate interns working the summer shift at USA Today decided to take those comments and blow them up into an actual story. And then a bunch of right-wingers counter-reacted to the stories, and then a bunch of left-wingers counter-reacted to the right-wingers counter-reacted to the stories. And how many times have we now seen this thing play out? I mean, I remember, for example, when The Little Mermaid came out, the live-action Little Mermaid came out, and people were apparently incredibly angry that it was a black mermaid. And then you went and you looked through the actual tweets, and you were like, no one was angry that it was a black mermaid. There was like literally one or two tweets who was angry that it was a black mermaid. And then the counter reaction to those hypothetical one or two tweets basically went global. Like, we got to get smarter than that, because I mean, we're being played, right? I mean, we are being played by corporations that want to continually suck us into these outrage cycles. I mean, just think of the earned media that American Eagle and Sydney Sweeney managed to generate as a result of 4 degrees of reaction and counter-reaction to a couple of blue sky tweets. I mean, millions of dollars of free media were generated as a result of that.
You're absolutely right, but I would nuance that a little bit by saying we are getting played, but I also think we're playing ourselves. And
of course we're playing ourselves. Of course we're playing ourselves.
This is, and you've touched on this already. You've talked about the scars that you have from some of these bizarre attacks on you. And then I think you more than me, but I think we've both certainly spoken about the societal bonkersness that lingers post-COVID. I was talking on the line this week with Andrew McDougall, talking about the role of social media and amplifying and kind of keeping constant outrage going. There is a segment of the population, and it's not a small segment, that is addicted to being outraged. And they get up every morning and they get online and they find what they're going to be angry about that day. And these people have always existed, but I think there's more of them now. And I will be outraged when I see something that is worth outrage, but I cannot understand the compulsion people have to always be angry. And I'm not speaking in the abstract, Jen, because I know people who, like, every morning in the group chat link, can you believe it? Look what they're saying now.
But we're not innocent of this. We're not innocent of that.
Who's you? Us as individuals?
Yeah,
the line. Who are you talking
you
about?
and I, the line, and you and I, we're not innocent of this. I mean, we've built a career on takes. Even last week we got sucked into the Sydney Sweeney conversation. I mean, like, we're not innocent of this too. We're as human as anyone else, and we're as prone to this stuff as anyone else. I think that when I look at sort of what our role is here at the line here, is that increasingly I'm less and less interested in engaging in the hot take shit. Mm-hmm. And I'm more and more interested in engaging with building real and lasting and durable social cohesion.
I don't think we're particularly hot takey, and that's the line as an institution and you and I as individuals.
There's no need for us to be defensive in this. Like, look, we're not. But I think that where I'm more focused on where I want to take the line in the next couple of years is I recognize that social cohesion has been damaged as a result of a lot of different factors, COVID among them, and the way governments responded to COVID among them. Part of the thing that's hugely damaging social cohesion is the way that our people in authority are talking to us as people, right? Like, they're not talking to us as equals and citizens. They're talking to us like children. Social cohesion and trust is not built that way. Social cohesion and trust is built by meaningful disagreement and debate. That's good faith, not outrage driven, but good faith. And that's how we come to conclusions about the way we need to be behaving in the world and the way that we need to be acting. And I think there's an opportunity for us, because we've not chosen to go the Donald Trump route, because we've chosen the political decisions that we've made, and because the culture is changing the way that it is, for us to try and get our heads out of our asses and to try and build something, a meaningful and durable kind of national narrative and national identity again. And that's not going to look like what it was prior to COVID. It's going to be something new. It's an evolving thing. It should always be evolving. But I think we have a role to play in that. And I think there's a role for us to play in being critical and challenging authority and challenging power, but in a way that's constructive and good faith, not in a way that is, we're just outraged about the next thing and the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And then before you know it, you look around and social cohesion's collapsed. I mean, one of the things that really struck me last summer, remember when we had the water main break in Calgary? There was a big pipe burst. And we in Calgary had to massively restrict our water restrictions for months. And they were very significant water restrictions. These were not minor things. Like, my garden died. They were very significant water restrictions. And the way that authority, and particularly Jyoti Gondek, talked to Calgarians was all wrong. It was very much a, how dare you not restrict your water restrictions, you selfish, entitled, white people, as opposed to, we fucked up, the pipe burst, and now I need all your help to get us back to where we need to be. So there was massive communication errors there. But there was also a lot of crazy conspiratorial nonsense. Like, this is part of the New World Order to restrict your water usage forever as a result of blah, 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 blah. Didn't turn out that way. Now did it? And I just thought that was such an interesting contrast to the way that Calgary responded in the wake of the 2013 floods.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Another water incident. I mean, Calgary's got issues with water demons. I get it. But that flood was way worse, way more massive than a water break. And like, half the downtown was flooded. A lot of communities were effectively, almost what we thought at the time, was destroyed. And how did Calgarians respond? We spontaneously showed up
to shovel out strangers' basements.
To shovel out strangers' basements.
Yeah. And
we did it en masse. Hundreds, thousands of Calgarians literally showed up on their strangers' doors and like, what do you need taken away? And we did it. It was one of the most beautiful examples of spontaneous order and social cohesion that I had ever seen and ever witnessed. And I wonder now today, if there was a flood like that, if the same thing would happen.
I remember,
or if everybody would be so busy, instead of showing up with their gumboots helping their neighbors out, instead we would be on our computers talking about how this was a military experiment gone wrong, and the government was trying to flood Calgary. The Ottawa was trying to flood Calgary using green lasers or shit, And we have to get back to where we were there. It's collapsed so fast, and I think that we have to get back to this idea of, no, a government leader can't dictate or force us to trust them. Like, that has to be rebuilt. And I think that authority has to recognize where it's gone wrong and losing authority and trust among the people. But we have to be part of the solution of helping people bridge that gap and doing it in a way that's responsible and at the same time not losing our fundamental role of like, no, our job is to call out bullshit. Our job is to call out when people in power are doing shitty things. But our job is not to get our audience continually wound up. That's not the goal.
And I agree entirely, but the danger there, I'm not saying but to disagree. I'm just saying the danger in that is, and I'm going to reveal something that you and I have talked about, and I don't think the listeners and viewers will be shocked by this, but like when people unsubscribe, they have the option to leave feedback. And it's useful as a business for us to look at that. What do people like? What do they not like?
Yeah,
things
absolutely.
like that.
So if you're going to unsubscribe, please do.
Please tell us why.
Yeah.
One of the fascinating things over the years, and I'm not saying this about any individual person, is exactly what you're describing. Calling out bullshit, but also doing it in a way that is hopefully reinforcing institutions as opposed to invalidating them and destroying them.
Mm-hmm.
Puts either you or I as individual writers of the line in general in a position where to a segment of the audience, we are conservative hacks who are destroying Trudeau. To a segment of the audience, we're in on it and we're refusing to talk about what he is doing to destroy our country as part of the WEF agenda. And I'm not raising this because I'm worried about it from the perspective of the business, but I'm saying it's a snapshot into where people's minds have gone. And I don't know, like when we talk about institutions, right? We talked at some length about TIFF at the beginning of the podcast. I don't know how institutions recover from that.
Look, I mean, we might fail. That's fine.
Yeah. It's useful to talk about it in terms that blunt, because how does TIFF, it's so easy, right? Like in theory, you get a CEO of TIFF who comes in and says, we're airing these films. Anyone who can't handle it can leave. This festival exists to do X, Y, Z. You can have editors in chief at newspapers who say to the young rebels, this newspaper exists to explore controversial ideas, and anyone who cannot work under these conditions can hand me their resignation by end of day.
Yeah, you can go start up your own whatever, and it can adhere to whatever values you think you can build an audience around. You do you. I'll help you. You want advice? I'll give you advice. Like, happy to.
Is it possible to unify society again?
Well, I don't know, but we can only try.
And we will.
Look, failure is always an option. I don't care if we fail. That's not the right way to put it. I don't care if we fail is not the right way to put it. I'm willing to accept failure as the price of admission.
Yeah, or I would phrase it as the possibility of failure does not invalidate the exercise.
That's right.
It's just interesting. 5 years ago, I had this image in my head, and it's a very Matt-esque image. I know you would probably imagine it differently, but like 5 years ago, an oil painting of you and I founding the line. And then 5 years later, 5 years of the line also in oil. And we're a little bit older and fatter. And the cannons are now on the other side of the castle. The castle's the same.
The castle's the same.
Yeah.
And it's a little castle. Very little.
But now the cannons were pointing this way. Now they're pointing that way. Now, some of them are still pointing that way because you always got to be careful. But one of the things, look, obviously along the way, we get things wrong. We blow calls. We make errors. We make corrections. But one of the things I think we were right about was, wow, the pendulum's going to swing right back through the middle, and there's no middle left to stop it.
Yeah.
It's gone. It's just us.
Well, I don't think it's just us. I actually think that there are people out there who are looking for something a little bit more thoughtful and moderate and nuanced, right?
I wish there were more of us.
Yeah, well, we're never going to be like a mass market. Matt, I think I've come to terms with this earlier in my life for a lot of different really important reasons. But I came to terms a long time ago that I was never going to be a mass appeal kind of person. Like
you always have a grin when you're about to go down that road, and I didn't know exactly what you were going to say, but I knew the vibe that was coming.
The people who like me a lot, but it's never going to be. I ain't ever going to hit the A-list. Let's just put it that way. I'm okay with that.
Are we the journalism version of the AV Club?
Yes, absolutely. No, I mean, the AV Club was cool, man. They were cooler than us.
We might have gone to, I think
we're more the yearbook
we did go
club.
To different high schools.
We're more the yearbook club, friend.
No, we're not. No, we're not. Yeah,
cool.
I think we can wrap it up here. But to me, the 5 years, all the details have changed. But good Lord, it's the same stupid fights with the same stupid people. Like last week, it was Sydney Sweeney. This week, it was TIFF. Or Nova Scotia walking ban. It's going to be something else next week. And you and I will go 25 for 25 guessing in it. As soon as it becomes clear what the topic of outrage will be next week, we'll know exactly what side everyone will be on. And that's just, God, I don't want to live that way. You talked about what like you want the line to be as a way of kind of building, unifying social institutions. I don't know if I have a snappy one sentence description of what I want the line to be, but maybe the best way of articulating it is I want a place where I can talk about the things that it's not that I can't talk about somewhere else, but I want a place where I don't have to talk about the things everybody else is talking about that week. I want a place where I can talk about, you know what, the world's losing their shit about Sydney Sweeney's commercial
Jeans.
Or Nova Scotia's walking ban. We're not going to talk about that week because that's not what we need to be talking about right now.
Or if we're talking about that, we're going deeper than the... Look, I don't mind talking about the Nova Scotia walking ban, but I don't want to have a talk about it where I'm taking one side or the other and then like defending that side to the hilt from the people on the other side of the trenches. I want to ask the question of, well, why are we having that fight? What's led to that fight? Why, like, what pathology are we stumbling upon that this is the thing we're losing our minds about today? And in that case, I thought that it's very clear, even from the people who were engaging in civil disobedience and walking through the woods, COVID was on their mind.
Oh yeah,
and
this is COVID 2.0. This is the exact same fight with the exact same.
This is why they did it. And I mean, I'll confess my own thing. When COVID happened, one of the things that really made me crazy was feeling like I couldn't go for a walk in the park. And I think the thing that broke me as a young parent was seeing the kids' playgrounds done up in yellow tape at a point when we knew that likely spread of the infection in any outdoor spaces was basically infinitesimally low. Like, that was the point at which the governments actually lost me as a human being. And I was like, I've now lost faith in the government's ability to make rational decisions according to a grounded risk profile, because I'm sitting here and I'm looking at my goddamn kids' playground wrapped up in tape. And that hurt. Like, I don't know how to describe it, but that kind of broke me a bit. It broke me because I'm like, so wait a minute, I can't take my new baby outside for a walk. I can't take my new baby outside to the playground. Like, what do you expect us to do? That really fucked with me. And it fucked with me because it wasn't that you were hurting me at that point. You were hurting my kids, my very young kids who couldn't understand what was going on. And it broke me because, like I said, that was the point where I realized that the people who were making decisions were making their decisions based in fear and not in any kind of rational risk matrix anymore. And that was where I lost a lot of faith in the ability of our governments to respond sensibly. I was willing to absolutely take sacrifices and changes and change my lifestyle and make sacrifices for the common good. But those sacrifices had to be rationally grounded.
Yep.
And that was the point where I'm like, these people aren't making rational decisions anymore. And that I'm not sure I've totally recovered from that. Which is not to say I went full on like convoy style, like every single decision the government is making is suspect. I never went that far down that hole. But it was hard for me to emotionally recover from that moment. And I can understand emotionally what that sense of claustrophobia felt like. And I can feel that sense of claustrophobia when I hear people talk about not being able to go for a walk in the woods, especially in a place like the Maritime Provinces where being outdoors, especially during summer, is such a huge part of the lifestyle, right? Like, that's part of the reason why you're there. And I can understand why people were like, well, look, I understand why you're not letting us camp. I understand why you're not letting us have fires. But walking in the woods, like, that's a fear response. That's not a rational, grounded response. I can understand the emotions behind that. And I think that failure to acknowledge the emotions behind that fear only further perpetuates that sort of hyperpolarization cycle.
Yeah. You know what? This may sound like a criticism. I swear to God, I don't mean it that way. But you said a minute ago, you don't know if you recovered from it. I don't think you have, but I don't think I have either. Like, I don't think any of us have. Like, I don't know if I have met a single human being who has properly processed those 5 years, or I guess those 2 years.
Just
really
2 years, yeah.
And for me, my own moment was when, I guess it was, I'd have to go look at a timeline here, but it was a little bit over a year. The vaccines were arriving in strength. People were rapidly getting vaccinated. And every time there was a surge in numbers, even though we had confidence that the vaccines were going to blunt the worst results of those surge, cases were going up, but in a vaccinated population. And I was looking at, and I'm picking on Doug Ford here because I live in Ontario, and he was the public face of this, where he was treating it as if it was identical to the second wave, which he had lost control over, or the third wave in Ontario, which he lost control over and did a lot of political damage to him. The rational response to a surge in a vaccinated population wasn't the same as to any previous surge, but the political imperative was that if he didn't order the exact same things, he'd be criticized for not doing enough.
Yeah.
You did this last time. Why aren't you doing it this time? And the answer was because the risk factor has changed.
Yeah.
We are in a materially different situation, and we will respond in a materially different way. And it took months for that to actually happen. And I think we talk about recovery and stuff. I have largely given up on thinking any Canadian jurisdiction will ever handle a crisis well. And you and I have talked about this, and we're talking about societal bulwarks. One of the reasons I do think we have to start rebuilding is because even I've concluded in an emergency, we're on our own.
Yeah. Yeah. So these are things we need to talk. Look, I'm all for the whole memory holding of COVID and understanding everybody gets a mulligan and I'll move on. I understand that impulse, and I don't necessarily think it's a bad impulse. The problem is that a lot of these emotions are still festering right underneath the surface. Mm-hmm. And they come up. They're coming up during crisis. They're coming up during emergencies. And I think that without actually addressing the feelings behind them, and acknowledging those feelings as valid, we're not going to move on. We haven't. And we're not going to be able to build the social cohesion that we need to function appropriately as a society. So that's kind of why I shared my playground story. You know what I mean? Like, I get it. I feel it. I do think we have to be able to now look back and say, I trust my public health ward to give me good information going forward. And I think I have to be able to say, look, I think that bad decisions were made during COVID, and I think errors were made during COVID. And I can process my feelings about that. And at the same time, not move into a place where I think the answer is for me to go off grid and start falling down YouTube rabbit holes about how, the COVID vaccine is going to kill us all en masse.
Well, the off grid part has appeal.
Well, there you go. But, like we have to be able to come back from this and recover and acknowledge mistakes were made and move forward. And
you know what we also have to do? We have to forgive the mistakes.
And we have to, that's exactly it. We have to, I have to forgive the city of Calgary for taping up that playground. I have to be able to forgive them.
I think,
because guess what? That was 5 years ago, and my kids have been playing on playgrounds, and they are okay.
But it's also like, I think that's correct. Like, that's a moral reason to forgive. I think there's also a pragmatic reason to forgive. No one bats 1,000 during a novel scenario.
Of course not.
Errors were made. Statements were made that were not true.
That's right.
And I am by nature, I understand the fog of war, that you're gonna not bat 1,000. But I think some members of the public are less able to forgive. And I also think, to your point before, the Gondek reference to the floods, the politicians have never asked for it. This country has never had a national or even provincial level inquiry that I'm aware of to COVID and lessons learned and mistakes. The British are having a multi-volume review. We just went, we're not going to do that. And in the absence of that, and it's too late now. Like if we convened a COVID inquiry today, it would be useless.
And the types of COVID inquiries that have been done by like the Preston Manning people who are like, they're not credible. They're not credible inquiries. I'm sorry to say.
So we'll head into whatever the next crisis is
with a severely attenuated concept of duty and responsibility and social cohesion. And I think that that's potentially fatal. So hopefully we don't have another pandemic anytime soon, because I don't think it's going to go well. But to that end, we've now been rambling on way too long, Matt. I think
but this is great content. But yes, yeah. I agree. Mostly because I'm out of water and my throat is getting dry. So
all right. So on that note, like and subscribe. Check us out, www.readtheline.ca.